looking for escapism, I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. Today, I'm going to look at the 2005 film House of Wax, which is actually a loose remake of the 1953 film of the same name, which was in itself a remake of the 1933 film Mystery of the Waxwork Museum. Now, as ever, I'm not reviewing the film, but instead I want to look at the psychology of the formerly conjoined twin villains, the symmetry of the protagonists in relation to the villains, and also discuss the sociopathy of said villains, Beau and Vincent. House of Wax has a very simple plot. A group of kids are on their way to watch a school football game, but while stopping for the night, they draw attention of a mysterious truck driver. After a standoff where the driver remains anonymous behind blaring headlights, the impulsive Nick, played by the rather gorgeous Chad Michael Murray, smashes one of the truck's headlights. When morning comes, one of the gang's cars suddenly needs a new fan belt, and so the group set off to find a garage and come across the fictional town of Ambrose, where, upon interrupting a funeral, they find the gas station manager and, already running into cultural confrontation and colloquial unpleasantness, a spiral of events sees the group being preyed on by a masked figure who begins either turning them into wax figurines or just killing them outright. By the end of the film, we learn that the whole town isn't populated by anyone and the residents have all been coated and forever preserved in wax by Beau and Vincent, and even the entire funeral, twitching curtains and time light shows are all merely staged like a giant exhibition. Every denizen of the town has been killed, preserved and displayed in a fully automated piece of frozen time art. The climax of the film takes place in the titular museum where, now acutely aware that Beau and Vincent are formerly conjoined twins now separated by surgery, Vincent's face was fused to the back of Beau's head at birth, the protagonists fight the antagonists amidst a burning building made from wax until the film ends with the twins refused back together in a wax-coated death, and we learn of a third child, introduced as a dim-witted bumpkin earlier on in the film, which gives the film a rather unnecessary and ominous closing shot. Now, it's no coincidence that the final two surviving protagonists are brother and sister as opposed to lovers or slasher-style virgins who are crushing on one another. And there is a reason for this symmetry in both protagonist and antagonist, as the film uses assumptions and broad strokes to paint both polar opposites. At the start of the film, we see two young children, Beau and Vincent, living with their parents. One child eats calmly, plays contentedly, whilst the other is brought in fighting and has to be restrained in his high chair with straps so tight they cut into his wrists. We see the parents losing their temper with this child, screaming and lashing out, and the suggestion is that this child is the masked and deformed twin Vincent who performs the wax mutilations at the midway point of the film, the one whose face was fused to his sibling's head. However, upon revealing that the scars are on Beau's arms later on in the movie, there's a switcheroo in our assumptions and we see that Vincent is the gifted one and Beau is the short-tempered and violent one. In contrast to this, the protagonists Alicia Cuthbert, every boy's crush from the series 24, and Chad Michael Murray, an easy hunk to crush on full stop, start the film at odds with each other as we see Cuthbert's polite-mannered Carly spending time with her perfect and all-round good boyfriend Wade, played by Jared Padalecki, whilst Murray's Nick is shown as antisocial, slovenly, bad-tempered and caustic towards the entire gang. Again, our assumptions are tugged towards judging his belligerent, surly and confrontational nature, but as we spend more time with the group, we learn that Nick blames Carly for his trouble with the law, but despite his argumentative nature, he doesn't hate his sister, kind of respects her boyfriend, and has even taken the blame for dim-witted Dalton's Grand Theft Auto. Nick is the evil twin right from the start of the film, aggressive towards everyone, sitting out any messing about, and generally challenging any level of authority or even light-hearted company. What House of Wax does well, though, is showing the protagonist's switcheroo early on by showing some glimpses through Nick's psychological armour. Through plot contrivances, Carly being tortured by Beau and the worsening situation, their relationship changes and we see Nick's good heart and the positive uses of his impulsivity as, with their friends all slaughtered, he is forced to protect his sister from the homicidal twins. During one argument in the film, Nick even says, "You're the good twin, and I'm the bad one," to Carly, as she complains at why he is even tagging along on their trip. Mirroring what's to come, as the antagonists comprise one good and one bad twin, Nick is a far cry from Beau, but, like Beau, he enjoys a little mental torture of his more perfect other half because he was also treated badly by the family purely for not being like his sibling. Whilst Beau was abused for not being anything like Vincent, the suggestion is that Carly gets more rewards the more she excels, whilst this exemplary behaviour only adds further mud to her brother's name. However, and again just like Beau, Nick has genuine love for his sibling and, also like Beau, there are moments of regret where Nick realises he has gone too far. Attached to his sister partly by blood but also by love, he pushes her away only to apologise as, deep down, he has her best interests at heart. For Bo, we are on a different level of scale, and instead of a push me pull you style relationship, he works on the abusive line of bullying and reproachment. Let me explain. Bo has grown up inside a household of abuse and torture. Nick may well be misunderstood, but he had every opportunity from a middle-class family, but either by bad luck or bad loyalty, he threw away his chances and he is now an embittered ball of projection who just resents and lashes out. Bo's personality, on the other hand, veers more to sociopathy than sulking martyrdom and projection, and this is because of the relentless abuse and unfair comparisons he suffered. We will come to sociopathy and the biopsychosocial malformation of this in a bit, but before we get to that, we have to remember that Bo was always second to Vincent in everything. Both in talent, temperament, and positive attention, Bo has grown up without the developmental psychological milestones of warmth, facial mirroring, acceptance, and reward. This deeply affects him, and, through the 4 stages of separation individuation, we can see how this would have shaped the nascent parts of his personality. But what is the rapprochement phase of individuation? The period of rapprochement spans the ages of approximately 15 to 24 months and is characterised behaviourally by an active approach to rebond back to the caregiver. Children begin to realise the limits of their omnipotence and have a new awareness of their separateness and the separateness of the caregiver. After the practising phase, children begin to realise the limits of their omnipotence and have a new awareness of their separateness and the separateness of the caregiver. All children, when born, form their nascent personalities and interpretations of the world via interactions with their parents. Margaret Mailer, paediatric analyst and psychologist, first described this separation individuation process developed over 4 phases in early childhood via differentiation, practice, rapprochement, and consolidation. I'm going to do a video about this in more detail soon, but the phases in brief are differentiation, bonding with the caregiver and feeling separation anxiety, often using an inanimate object to cling to safety when separated from caregivers as trust and reassurance is forming. Second phase, practicing, autonomous function and crawling where the child begins to learn independence. Third phase, rapprochement, a struggle with autonomy and need to realise there are limitations and therefore a need to rebond deeply with the caregiver. And the final phase, consolidation. All trust, concepts and representational language are coalesced and a stable identity is formed. Bo is disrupted through all these phases, which are all completed by 3 years of age. But the object relationship with his parents, frequent comparisons and belittling, plus being on the receiving end of violence from someone much more powerful than him, means there was no rebonding after autonomous separation from his parents. Instead, much of his deformed psychology starts its inception here and, as with emotionally unstable people in later life, his development whilst young destroys his need for autonomy and support. This is partly why Bo bullies and then apologises to Vincent at parts of the film, via a form of rapprochement which involves intermittent reinforcement and unstable attachment. Bo loves Vincent, but is both emotionally immature and cruel. He shouts and belittles, then will apologise and promise to be nicer, a trait in many domestic violence relationships, which means Vincent lives under a constant tyrannical relationship where he is brutalised and punished, only for Bo then to apologise and state it won't happen again. Vincent's adult life is now mirroring Bo's childhood, where he suffered arbitrary punishment between bouts of gentle rapprochement and reconciliation which would never last. Basically, Bo's tumultuous young life is now transferred onto the adult Vincent, as Bo is the caregiver now their parents are dead. This leads us on to the final part of this essay, the sociopathy. Nick isn't sociopathic. He's mildly antisocial, which is more through bad conduct and misguided loyalty. Nick lost his scholarship through bad behaviour and is now on a self-destructive course of projected blame. He isn't unfeeling, doesn't lack empathy and doesn't manipulate the rights of others but does act out, behave irresponsibly and blames others for his problems. He protects Carly with his life, secretly approves of her douchebag boyfriend and sticks to the waste of space Dalton like a best friend would, but his brain and personality isn't deformed or shaped through chronic abuse. It's more maladaptive from repeated mistakes and the envy of his sister's attention. When Bo tortures Carly, which ends up with her mouth superglued and part of her finger being cut off, Nick saves her and shows deep concern. This actually begins the reparation in their relationship, but unlike the antagonists, Nick and Carly's rapprochement is permanent and not a temporary reconciliation before more trouble. For Bo, he is a sociopath and there is no such future, reprieve or relationship reformation. Now, psychopaths are often born psychopaths, which means there is a biological problem with their brains, as cited in my earlier video about the strangers. Sociopaths tend to have normal brain structures, but things go wrong during their nurturing phase. This brings us back to what we were saying earlier. Beau's abuse and trauma when he was young has affected his brain development, so now he exhibits lack of empathy, anger, manipulation, bouts of violence, and poor impulse control. Psychopaths can delay gratification, sociopaths are more impatient, hostile, and have less glib and charm than the master Machiavellian manipulators that are pure psychopaths. Beau shows this right from the start all the way to his apparent infatuation with Carly as, from the moment he meets her, he leers at her while sneering at Wade. His temper vacillates right from the funeral scene, and throughout the film he changes from calm to furious in a blink of an eye. Emotional instability is another sign of problems in the rapprochement phase. Psychology studies have shown that nearly all sociopaths veer into violence, and it's important to realise that psychopaths aren't always violent. Psychopaths are master manipulators, charmers, and users, but not always killers or sadists. Sociopaths are more impulsive, use projection, have less planning skills, and are more frequently aggressive to others. Now, there is no doubt that the reason neither Beau or Vincent have ever been stopped from killing the whole town is because Ambrose is a middle-of-nowhere town, and knocking off its residents one by one would have gone unnoticed for some, but as the whole town is now waxed, somewhere, while they were doing this, there must have been a massacre which Beau could have lost all patience and just slaughtered a whole production line of corpses for Vincent to turn into sculptures. There is top-down mental planning in their scheme to open a town of wax, but this exhibit has taken years and is never really destined to open. It's a sick fantasy, and one which would have seen so much violence and blood as every pensioner, woman, man and child was slaughtered and sculpted before being placed into position. There is the suggestion that Beau chose the funeral scene to freeze the moment his parents died too. This means he can go to church every day and relive the moment where he was set free and finally buried his abusers, giving him a sense of recurring power via a frozen visualization of the moment his mind knew he was no longer going to get abused by the two people who destroyed his life. Standing over the casket of someone you hate is the ultimate power. Looking down on them and the feeling of freedom is a really empowering feeling for someone who has spent so much of their life feeling powerless. Anyway, let's close with the Myers-Briggs personality analysis and look at what Beau and Vincent are. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that, although there is positive symptomology in the label, the two personalities are symbiotically attached, and there are also connotations and characteristics in the types which play a part in sociopathy. Anyway, let's dive in. As ever, I will leave the slide up for a moment so you can have a proper look as I talk. Beau is an ESTP and therefore is known as an entrepreneur. Now, as Beau is a stone-cold sociopath, his qualities veer towards the negative, but he is resourceful, outgoing and observant. Now, sociopaths need a lot of stimulation, which fits the energetic side of his personality, but his massacre of the town, his duplicitous presentation when enticing new people into the House of Wax, and his confrontational attitude is all part of the Machiavellian nature which enables him to corner, charm, and then leave his victims to his brother's tendon-severing predilections. ESTP cover only 4% of the worldwide population and, despite being bold, direct and sociable, of which Beau is to Nick, Wade and Carly despite his motives, his negative qualities are impatient, risk-prone, defiant, and he doesn't always see the bigger picture. ESTP personalities bond with ISFJ and, surprise, Vincent registers as this personality type. Also rare, Vincent is known as a defender and his strengths are reliable, sensitive, practical and an eye for detail. However, his weaknesses are avoids confrontation, dislikes change, and neglects his own needs. Sensitive and gifted, the ISFJ repress their emotions, are practical and also observant. Vincent relies on his brother and, despite being the artist, his social skills would never allow him to lure people to the House of Wax. Conjoined at birth and forever destined to need each other by being almost psychically linked, these two opposites of introverts and extroverts are two sides of the same coin. By the end of the film, Nick and Carly also finish in a symmetry of tactile positioning, Carly resting against her brother as they ride off in the ambulance, the closest they have been for the whole film. The experience they have been through is glutinous and, now these two are rejoined, albeit emotionally, not physically, they finish the film on a completed character arc. The good twin and the bad twin, now just siblings in perfect symmetry, no longer fractured and full of resent towards each other. The rapprochement is permanent. They have finally reached consolidation. Anyway, that's it for now. But if you have any characters, antagonists, protagonists, films, anyone or anything you'd like me to put through the psychological prism, then let me know in the comments. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.
What you gonna do? It's a switcheroo.